I invite you today to think about two very different meal experiences. There's the meal that you get when you go through the drive-thru, that experience. And then I invite you, even though it's right now feeling like a distant memory, the meal that you have when you are invited into someone's home. Now, there are similarities about both meals, whether it is organic spinach salad with balsamic vinaigrette or two-all beef patty special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. They get calories, they fill the belly, but other than that, they're very different experiences. And in our pre-pandemic world, where drive-thrus weren't pretty much the only option or curbside pickup, usually what motivated a drive-thru meal was a sense of too much to do, busyness, hurry, that there wasn't time to cook or wasn't time to sit down on the way to something else. So we'd pull up to a speaker encased in plastic with a menu around it, and a disembodied voice would greet us, sometimes with distortion to add to the sense of adventure. And we'd give our order. So you give the order, and then there's an instruction to pull around to the window, which we do in a haze of car exhaust, and come to the window, and there's a financial exchange of some kind, and then handed a bag of food. And then we're told to have a nice day. And off we go, on to the next thing. Often, if we're eating in the car, not even conscious of what it tastes like, conscious that we're even eating, but just this perfunctory, necessary thing to get something in our bellies while our thoughts are already moving on to the next thing. Now, contrast that with the experience of eating in someone's home as a guest. We might be just as busy, life might be just as full, but we choose to let it go. The busyness and fullness, to surrender those things, to make time and space to be present, to the people, to the food. And so we go, and instead of a disembodied voice, there's real people. And they might, and I know it's even painful for me to think about how it's been, and I know it will be again someday, but greeted with a handshake or a hug. And if it's cold, maybe an invitation to take a coat or a scarf or something like that, and then invited in to a space, a home. There might be appetizers, cheese and crackers, glass of wine. Maybe it's around a kitchen that conversation's taking place, maybe in a living room or family room. And then eventually there's the let's move to the table. And there's words of thanks offered, sometimes to God, sometimes just to the chef, sometimes to one another. And then as the food is passed around, the conversation tends to go deeper. There's sharing of stories and laughter, sometimes tears. And then, so enjoying one another, once the table food is finished, it's not usually a dash and run, but maybe an invitation to more comfortable chairs where there's dessert and coffee or some such thing. More conversation. And then when it is time to go, no one says, have a nice day, but rather there's sincere words of gratitude and thanksgiving, even words like, I love you. Really different meal experiences. Which kind of meal throughout the arc of your life has been more common? And if we think of those meals more symbolically, which type of meal, which type of pace has been more representative of your overall arc of life? So I'm not measuring it right now. Everything's weird and different right now. But just thinking of the overall arc of your life, which kind of more fast food or sit down and savor? What has the pace of life been? Well, I'm asking these questions around food because the Bible loves to talk about food. It's a great symbol. Banquets and feasts and come and see and taste that the Lord is good. And in our passages the lectionary offers us today, we have references to meals and eating. In the Acts passage, which comes after resurrection, after even Pentecost, in the linear time dimension of the story, Peter is sharing good news with a community of people. He's telling them that they can turn around from life lived separate from God and each other, and they can be immersed in God's Spirit and life and love and embody what Jesus called the reign of God. That they can get in on it. And people are so excited to be part of it. We hear 3,000 people said yes that day. And then as that story continues, we get this little narrative aside where we wonder, well, what continued to nurture them in that yes? Because it's not a one-time yes and then you're done. There's a nurturance, there's a practice, and we see the DNA of the early Christian communities. What were the practices that were central? And that they pray. They gather and worship. There are stories and remembering about Jesus and the passages and stories that help them understand and interpret that. The sense of community, they shared things in common out of their abundance and resources. And we hear breaking of the bread. That was central. The idea, and that was not, by the way, early on, a sacrament called communion with a little pinch of bread and a little thimbleful of juice. That was a meal. That's what they were talking about. Something happens at table that's important in terms of spiritual life and what that table represents symbolically. And we see some ideas around this for the early Christian community and how Luke tells this story that we have that takes place in the immediate post-resurrection time. And that's why we have it in this Easter season, this story. And one thing I invite you to do, imagine this story in our typical cultural pace. If it happened today. Again, I'm inviting us to imagine more pre-pandemic because everything is unique and different right now. But, for example, the story takes place while people are walking and talking. Some of us have rediscovered that gift. But mostly how we move about is we're roaring along. Oracle, the 10, Ina. And you don't run into people and have chats when that's how you move about the world. So we're going to have to imagine if it happened now that there's Cleopas and the other disciple pick up a hitchhiker, this resurrected Jesus, and invite him into the car. They don't know, though, it's Jesus. They don't know who it is they don't recognize. But they're moving along. And would they have a deep and meaningful conversation like they do in the Luke story? Maybe, but often between road noise, and we have usually things playing on the speakers of our cars, podcasts. I'm listening to NPR all the time right now, where they fill the space with noise and sound and music that would then preclude meaningful conversation. And certainly, if the stomachs were rumbling and it was time for some food, it would not be with the hitchhiker on I-10. It wouldn't be, hey, why don't you come on over to our house? It'd be, all right, well, we're all hungry. We're going to pull through the drive-thru and put the food, toss it back to the person in back, maybe go a little further. You get them to their destination, off they go, and there's probably not much that's meaningful or transformative. And how that contrasts with the pace and feel of the story before us today. That first we have people who are walking. And some of you are discovering in ways maybe you hadn't before, you see things differently when you're walking. And that there's time and space when we're not so hurried and rushed to have meaningful conversation. And some of us are having those. So we hear them walking, talking, they're having meaningful conversation, and then a stranger comes alongside. Now, in the story, this is not unique because in lots of these resurrection stories, they don't get that it's Jesus. And that's a reminder that resurrection is not resuscitation. Resurrection is not a return to the previous life. It's somehow a transformed way of living. And a symbol of that is that Jesus doesn't just look like old Jesus. There's something transformed or different or new. So anyway, the stranger, from their perspective, comes alongside them. And they welcome the stranger. Jesus taught people to do that. That's deep in their own scriptural tradition. Welcome the stranger. Some of us know we're supposed to, and we tend to think of it as, won't that be nice for the stranger to feel welcomed by us in our places of privilege or power? But this is a story that reminds us that welcoming the stranger brings gifts to the people who do the welcoming. They welcomed the stranger along, and there was discovery and insight. It was a mutual gifting in the welcoming of the stranger, who then asked them, what are you talking about on the way? And I think of the typical responses of deflection. Oh, nothing. Or, we're just, we're talking about the weather, whatever, we're fine. But I notice how these disciples, like those women disciples in the Easter morning story, when they're asked, what's going on for you? They tell the truth. They speak what's real and authentic. And I know that's hard. We're trained not to do it. I can't tell you how many people right now, when I say, "How are you?" they say, "Fine." And I think, really? So I, for myself, because I want to say it too, that I've had this practice where my response is twofold. I said, well, in the context of global pandemic, I guess I'm doing okay today, or there's things I'm thankful for today. But in the context of normal life, oh my God, this is terrible. That's what's true. Scary, unknown, suffering, confusion, conflicting information. It's hard. So they speak what's true. And by doing so, it invites growth. It invites conversation. It invites new ways of seeing things. And basically, as they continue walking along, a Bible study breaks out. That the stranger starts talking with them about the scriptures and helping them have context and ways of interpreting their experience, which is why in every church I've ever served, even when there's already some things in place, I always will add or begin Bible studies. Because, and I know, I'm sorry, the Bible has been weaponized by some Christians and groups, but what happens when we engage those stories and let them speak to our own stories, there's stretching and insight and aha. We sometimes wrestle and argue with them, but it brings growth and insight. We hear later they say, weren't our hearts burning within us? And then it's getting late. They're close to home in Emmaus, which, by the way, is 7 miles from Jerusalem. It's not a short little stroll. So they're getting close to home, and we hear that the stranger acts like he's going to move on, apparently not going to impose upon them. And they say, oh, wait, no, something powerful is here. And they welcome the stranger even more fully into their lives. First into the conversation, into the stroll, the journey, now into the intimate place of table. Come have dinner with us. And as they're sitting there, strangely enough, the stranger acts like he's the host of the meal. Because it's the host who usually would do the take, bless, that sort of thing. Even so, Jesus takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, gives it to them. And even before we hear the response, those who know the Jesus story, those who've been living the story, they say, hey, we've heard that somewhere before. In multiple stories, Jesus in Gospels feeds the multitudes. And every time it says he took, blessed, broke, gave. At his Last Supper on what we call Maundy Thursday, took, blessed, broke, gave. Here it is again. And one of the things I think of, and I won't go deeply into it today, but that this take, bless, break, give is a summary in some way of the Jesus path that he teaches. That here we are in life. Whatever it is, take it. Don't ignore it. Don't deny it. Don't fight it. Don't flee it. Take it. Be present to what is. But you don't take it like, oh, take it. But take it in the presence of God. That's the blessing part. Inviting God into what is. Come, Holy Spirit. Hear how God's still speaking. There's the blessing. And when we invite God into what is, then there's breaking. Sometimes it's breaking open and insight. Sometimes it's a breaking apart of old ideas or old structures so that we can be open to what's new, to grow, to expand. And then all of that is for the purpose of then giving. Taking what is, which might feel scarce or fearful, inviting God's presence that breaks open possibilities, breaks out old ideas, and then helps us be gifts given in the world. It's what Jesus had been living and teaching them all along. So there, as the stranger does those things, the familiar things, they wake up and say, whoa, this is Jesus alive again in this moment. This is resurrection. Here it is, right here and now. And then he's gone. And a lot of times in Bible studies, people feel disappointed. Where did he go? That seems unfair, magic Jesus. But I think about the symbol in the story, and I think here's what Luke has going on. Is that the Jesus outside of them, teaching, talking, they don't need that anymore. Once they wake up to life rising, that Jesus is now inside of them. Just like the bread has been taken inside of them. Jesus is alive. Spirit is alive in them. And now they're in on resurrection. And just like those women on that early morning time, they become vectors of infection in the best sense. They go back They already walked the 7 miles. I would have been tired. But they can't help it. They want to go back and carry this new life, this power, this presence, this hope to the community. And this is such an important reminder for us. It's powerful, this story. Especially, I think, in this season. Because so much calls us to live in the sense of the fight and the flight, in the scarcity, the fear, the anxiety. And that even when we don't have a lot to do, some of us, there's this pressure, though, that keeps us anxious. We've been so trained to survive and to make it and to accumulate. I mean, it's so powerful in us that there are people around the country protesting, not children in cages, not inequality of people of different racial or ethnic backgrounds, not protesting the suppression of LGBTQ rights. They are protesting so they can get a haircut, so they can go shopping, so they can engage commerce. And we need that. The economy is really struggling, which means individuals are struggling. But look at what people are willing to protest, because it's wired in us to accumulate, to grab, to shop, to buy, to have. And there's this rush to get back at it. There was this family I knew in Pennsylvania. They hosted every Tuesday night something they called pasta night. There'd be a big pot of sauce that they would make, big bunch of noodles. They would have a salad. And you could just show up, or you could bring something. I like to bring cookies, because I like cookies. And sometimes people brought a nice loaf of bread, but it was just this open table. And some were invited, encouraged. Others sometimes brought friends. Every time I went, there were different people. There were music students from Russia. There was a young woman who'd grown up in another country who was Muslim. There were atheists and Christians. This family happened to be Christian. For them it was a sense of hospitality, what God called them to. So we would gather, be welcomed into this home, gather at the table. There would be blessing of prayer, of thanks, meal, shared food, passed, deeper conversation, interesting people and time. And I will tell you, every time I was gathered there and the gifts, the people taken, blessed, broken, I then had something to give. I had more life in me. I had more love in me. And I will tell you that never, ever has happened as I exited a drive-through lane. So as we are in this hard time, we won't always be in this time. And there'll be a call to get back at it, to get things roaring again. And I invite you to think about this story and what is life-giving. Is it in the hurry and the busy and the frantic? Or is it in the taking the time, the welcoming the stranger, the being in community, the savoring? Luke is telling us it's the latter. This is the way that there's resurrection in us and through us, and God knows we need it. Jesus shows us the way. Come and see. Amen.